Tonight, New Jersey's top 2 high school football teams participated in a tribute to law enforcement before their game.
The ceremony follows recent violence against police officers and protests from athletes who have refused to stand for the national anthem.
Fast-moving plays, hard-hitting tackles, and yet one of the most powerful moments on this football field was before the first whistle. Players from rival teams Middletown South and Toms River North held the American flag in a tribute to our nation and law enforcement.
We're all joined as a community, and everyone just being here having a great time and honoring those who fight for us.
But players and fans recognize the controversy on some sidelines this season. In a protest against oppression of minorities, 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick refuses to stand during the national anthem. Other professional and high school athletes have joined.
It's your right as an American to kneel if you want.
It's appalling. They can show their cause a different way.
The debate over kneeling was just part of what fueled Middletown's deputy police chief to organize this ceremony.
I respect his right to do that, but we should choose just another form of protest and stand up for the national anthem.
New Jersey ACLU reacted tonight saying people should be free to express their own opinions about the national anthem and what it stands for. The police department now says this ceremony was not about taking a stand against those who kneel. It was about honoring all of those who protect and serve.
It's a very difficult time to do this job, more so than at any point in the 22 years that I was on it.
But on this night, whether they wore a football jersey or a badge, the support for those in uniform was overwhelming.
Army officials said 10 soldiers have formally asked to be recognized as their new preferred gender. This news comes within weeks of the Pentagon allowing transgender service members to serve openly. The small number represents only those who have publicly said they are transgender. It doesn't include soldiers who are considering or beginning gender transition. The Pentagon's new policy took effect on October 1st, and the Army Secretary approved the service's new transgender guidelines earlier this month. The Army Chief of Staff said the key now is to educate the force, especially commanders who will have to make decisions about soldiers in their units who request gender changes.
It's being called an outrage. California National Guard soldiers being told to pay back bonuses that they received to re-enlist. But now KPIX5's Phil Mateer tells us help is on the way for those soldiers. Phil?
That's right. And the cavalry in this case is the California congressional delegation, which says this has got to change.
Outrage would be a good word to describe it.
Fellow California Congressman John Garamendi was equally shocked at the news.
We knew that it involved a few, but we had no idea that it involved 10,000. Many of whom have had multiple deployments to the most dangerous places in the world.
The bonuses started in about 2005, at the height of the Afghan and Iraqi wars. So bonuses of up to $15,000 were offered for Guard members to re-up.
They were giving bonuses away in droves. Gave us a briefing on it, PowerPoint presentation, this is what you qualify for. In the back of the room, you sign the contract if you're ready for it.
It was a drive to make numbers, and the National Guard here in California was not succeeding in making their numbers.
They come back all these years later and said, oh, by the way, there was a bureaucratic screw-up.
Many of them have had their credit ratings impacted. Many of them are struggling to pay it. Some have refinanced their homes. It's a real outrage.
What are you going to do about it?
There's one quick fix for this, and that is waive all of the IOUs for every National Guard member.
And we write the laws and we can change the laws, and that's exactly what we're going to try to do.
And one of the changes proposed is that even the vets who paid back the bonuses would get them back in order to make them whole again. And by the way, it isn't just California. They're auditing states around the country. Other National Guard units could be in the same situation. And that might actually give impetus for Congress to approve these changes.
Well, the Republicans have something to cheer about in Florida after a crucial ruling by a Florida judge just ahead of the early voting in that Sunshine State.
Early voting begins today in Florida, and the stakes, well, I don't need to tell you, this is a key state for both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And Republicans are saying, now that voting is underway, they've averted a potential problem with voter fraud. Recently, a federal court judge ruled against the Democrats, who wanted that judge to essentially open the door to roughly 60,000 voters who've not yet been verified. The Democrats asked the judge to bypass the usual verification process and just declare all of those people eligible to vote. The problem is that within some of those voters may have been fraudulent people.
You could have come in from China and said you're eligible to vote, and your ballot would have been counted. Our eyes are open, our ears are open, we're watching. We're not going to allow the Democrats to engage in any sort of voter fraud this election cycle. And I guess the message is, we're watching.
Now understand, nobody in Florida is ever turned away from casting a ballot. They have a process here called a provisional ballot. You can show up even if you're not verified, cast a provisional ballot, and then the canvassing board in your county verifies whether you are eligible to vote or not. In most cases, roughly 40% actually, those ballots are thrown out because the people are not eligible to vote. The Democrats were trying to bypass that process.
Ahead of the Cali camps dismantling, efforts are made to ensure the safety of unaccompanied children. Some are being transferred out of the camps before the evacuation. A bus with 80 unaccompanied minors from the refugee camp arrived in Croydon in London on Sunday. According to the Guardian newspaper, about 200 children have been brought to safety in the UK in the past week.
24 minutes after the hour, a UK mother horrified when she finds out that the 12-year-old child she's fostering is actually a 21-year-old trained jihadi terrorist. The guy was from Afghanistan. His name was Jamal. You can see a picture of him right there. And the family first sounded the alarm when his siblings noticed that he was really fit for his age and that he was also able to shoot a gun. He also threatened to kill his foster parents and had Taliban material on his cell phone. It's now feared that more terrorists could be posing as children to get into the UK from refugee camps.
You were saying this is very common.
Yeah, very common in Europe right now.
An eruption of anger at a migrant camp in Greece. Protesters denouncing delays in dealing with their asylum claims have set fire to facilities used by the European Asylum Support Office on the island of Lesbos. About 70 people, most from Pakistan and Bangladesh, threw rocks and burning blankets at containers inside the Moria camp, damaging a number of them. No injuries were reported, but several arrests were made.
New tonight, a fitness studio where trainers say their workouts are not just about getting in shape, it is a matter of life and death.
The sound of gunshots ring through the room. Instructors rush in with fake weapons. The approach is aggressive yet effective.
We need to react as fast as we can.
And this training could be life-saving. It's a unique workshop at Krav Maga experts in Union Square, taking students through an active shooter and hostage situation and teaching them how to survive. Their motto, defend, attack, live.
We are not waiting for anybody. You are going to be leaving that room first.
Students crawl on the ground to safety, carry away wounded victims, wrestle a gun away from an attacker, escape being held hostage, and learn to fight back in an extreme life or death situation.
Obviously, we prefer to wait for intervention teams, but if the threat is immediate or you have a chance, then we teach people what to do. If this is my last chance, this is my last second leaving, I better do something than nothing.
The instructors, all former members of the Israel Defense Forces, use physical, audio, and visual demonstrations to make this as real as possible. The intense 2-hour class is loosely based on this real active shooter at a cafe in Israel, just days before the deadly shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida. Now, with the ever-present threat of a terror attack, the students feel the need for this type of training.
Everybody expects in a bad situation for the other person to do something. You want to be that other person.
You don't always imagine yourself that you'd be in a situation like this, but you never know.
For someone like Jenna Salady, it's personal.
I was standing on the subway just like any other day. It was like noon, it wasn't even late at night, and somebody came up behind me and just sucker punched me in the back of the head. So I wanted to make sure that I was never a victim again.
While there is no guarantee of that, one thing is certain: everyone who leaves this room is more prepared than when they walked in.
Last resort, your life is on the line, or you're protecting someone you care about. I would go for it with what I learned today.
Krav Maga experts has only offered this class a handful of times, but they say it's become so popular, they're now offering it once a month.
This footage, broadcast by Russian state TV and other channels in early October, shows Russians taking part in 4-day-long emergency and civil defense drills across the country. Some 40 million people ultimately participated in what was the biggest test run of its kind since the fall of the USSR.
Вот куда бежать в случае бомбежки, половина не знает.
The drills were designed to train people how to survive in the event of a nuclear attack or other disasters.
Обязанность любого государства – обеспечение безопасности населения, защита граждан.
The Emergencies Ministry said it was preparing bomb shelters throughout Moscow that would accommodate the entire population of the capital.
Осматривают все подземные помещения, они подойдут, чтобы переждать налеты.
Videos of emergency workers in gas masks and preparatory tests for bomb shelters were prominently aired, and commentators on state TV could be heard making anti-American statements.
России надоело высокомерное американское вранье. Уже известного достаточно, чтобы почувствовать новую атмосферу ожесточенности.
Observers say the Kremlin's underlying goal of this kind of saber rattling is to reinforce Russia's stature as a nuclear superpower on par with the US.
Has been an explosion reported at a car park near the Chamber of Commerce in the Turkish city of Antalya. These are live pictures of the scene currently. The cause of the explosion is not yet known.
The Palestinian newspaper Al-Quds, which is published in East Jerusalem, interviewed Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman. The special interview was published in the Monday edition. During the interview, Lieberman commented on the tensions in the Gaza Strip and stressed that Israel was ready to lift the blockade in exchange for the end of violence. Quote, "If Hamas stops digging tunnels and launching rockets, we would be the first to invest in a harbor, airport, and industrial zone in the Gaza Strip," said Lieberman during the interview. Lieberman added that even the slightest change in this direction would prompt Israel to help restore Gaza. Lieberman also stressed that if another war was started, Israel's goal would be to completely eliminate Hamas in Gaza. When addressing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Lieberman said that he supports a two-state solution, but that he does not believe that the way to achieve this is through a land in exchange for peace strategy. Hamas's former Interior Minister Fathi Hamad said in response to Lieberman's threat that, quote, "All former defense ministers threatened us, and they're all dead," he said. "We're not afraid."
It could almost be waves rippling against a shoreline on another planet. Neon streams catching the light. But this hauntingly beautiful scenery is toxic. The yellow rock formations are raw sulfur, crumbling and melting under intense heat. It may look volcanic, but this is man-made.
When ISIS withdrew from the sulfur factory, they placed explosives inside what was a massive mountain of sulfur, as well as placing explosives over an expanse of around 4.5 kilometers of this factory, sending toxic, poisonous fumes into the air. And this is just one of the many ways that ISIS is trying to use whatever it possibly can to try to not only impede the advance of the security forces towards Mosul, but also in doing so cause maximum damage and maximum impact on the civilian population.
A major security operation has been launched in Pakistan after armed militants attacked a police training college. At least 59 people are feared dead and dozens more injured. It's believed 5 attackers stormed the college in Pakistan's western city of Quetta, firing as they entered the building. 2 of them have now been reported killed. The college hostel is thought to have been a main target. It's where around 200 to 250 police trainees were resting and sleeping, according to security officials. Hundreds have been evacuated from the building, while the injured have been taken to local hospitals. No group has so far claimed responsibility for the attack.
Tensions boil over into violence as armed men reportedly exchanged fire with UN peacekeepers in the Central African Republic's capital, Bangui. It came as hundreds of protesters gathered to call for the UN mission to leave, accusing the peacekeepers of not doing enough to protect them. We don't know what MINUSCA's mission is here. They are present when people are fighting each other and they don't intervene. We've seen it for ourselves that their mission is useless, and it's in our best interest to ask them to leave. The mission was set up in 2014 when fighting flared up between Muslim Seleka rebels and anti-Balaka Christian militias. The UN troops have been dogged by allegations of sexual abuse, and in the last month 30 people were killed and dozens wounded in an attack on refugees by Seleka forces.
The United Nations has reported a 10% rise in opium production in Afghanistan in the first half of 2016. Despite the Afghan government's counter-narcotics measures, the country is estimated to produce around 90% of the world's total opium.
Tackling opium cultivation in Afghanistan was one of the many slogans of these forces since they attacked this country back in 2001. But 15 years on, poppy cultivation still remains a big problem, not only for Afghans, but also for the whole region and even for the entire world. Afghan officials believe that the new UN report on opium cultivation in Afghanistan shows a worrying reversal in counter-narcotics efforts. Highlighting bilateral agreements and international conventions, top Afghan officials have asked Kabul's Western allies to honestly engage in counter-narcotics activities in Afghanistan.
Our international partners haven't done as much as they had pledged in agreements we signed with them. We still expect them to honestly address the opium crisis in Afghanistan. Narcotics are a global problem.
Experts also support the stance of the Afghan government when it comes to possible ways of tackling drug crisis in the country.
We are aware of international mafia's involvement in drug trafficking, and this is not deniable. Kabul's Western partners have always turned a blind eye to the rise in poppy cultivation. Therefore, Afghanistan needs to convince its Western allies to change their policies in accordance to the promises they made to Afghanistan and, of course, to the whole world.
Venezuela's opposition majority legislature has declared that President Nicolas Maduro's government had committed a coup. Opposition lawmakers say he blocked a referendum on removing him from power and are pressing to put him on trial. This came during an emergency session on Sunday to resolve the economic and political crisis gripping the nation, which was sent into brief chaos as supporters of Maduro stormed the premises.
The under-fire president of Venezuela has met the Pope in the Vatican. The pontiff encouraged Nicolas Maduro to tackle the mounting political crisis back home. The socialist government and opposition say they'll hold talks this coming Sunday.
According to a new study, big shifts in rain and warmth caused by El Niño and La Niña conditions in the western parts of the United States may boost Lyme disease and intestinal infections. Researchers say that over 4 decades, more tick-borne disease in the West and more gastrointestinal disease in the Northeast are confirmed to be tied to the periodic swings in weather conditions. For the new study, scientists examined hospitalization data in the United States for various diseases from 1970 to 2010 and looked for possible links to events caused by El Niño. Dr. David Fisman, the study's lead author, said in a statement, "Hopefully, people will understand that environmental change can impact their health, not only directly via extreme heat or cold, but also indirectly via impacts on infectious disease."
Seattle Times reports that Washington state is grossly unprepared for a large earthquake and tsunami that may strike in the coming decades, putting the area at risk for a humanitarian disaster. The newspaper said Washington's emergency managers will start asking residents to stock enough food and supplies in order to survive on their own for 2 weeks. Researchers believe that an 8 to 9.0 magnitude trembler has shaken Oregon and Washington about every 230 years. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, the last quake struck around 315 years ago, so one is overdue.
How'd you get to